Welcome to this edition of The District. I am Joan Garner, your Fulton County Commissioner for District 6. On today's show, we will be joined by U.S. Attorney Sally Yates. Sally Yates was nominated by President Obama to serve as United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia and was confirmed by the Senate on March 10, 2010. She is the first woman to serve as United States Attorney in the Northern District of Georgia. As the chief federal law enforcement official for the district, she oversees the prosecution of all federal crimes and the litigation of civil matters in which the government has an interest in a district encompassing over 6 million residents. She supervises a staff of approximately 95 lawyers and 80 support personnel. U.S. Attorney Sally Yates will share with us how her office is prosecuting those who violate the law, but also how they are trying to understand the community's needs and leading focused prevention and reentry efforts. We have a great show planned today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the District. We have a great show planned for you today. I am Joan Garner, your Fulton County Commissioner for District 6. Joining us today is U.S. Attorney Sally Yates. U.S. Attorney Yates will share with us how her office is prosecuting those who violate the law, but also how they are trying to understand the community's needs and leading focused prevention and reentry efforts. U.S. Attorney Sally Yates, welcome to the District.
Well, thank you, Joan. I'm so pleased to be here.
Great to have you, and I'm enjoying working with you and the work that you're doing, so we're so excited about hearing about what's going on in your office. So let's start with the first question here. Georgia has one of the largest numbers of failed banks, and white-collar crime seems to be on the rise as well. What is the U.S. Attorney's Office doing to address this issue?
Well, you know, it often surprises folks to hear that we had more bank failures in our district than any other district in the country. I think a lot of people assume that that would be in New York or Chicago or some of the other big cities. But, you know, that really is a result of a variety of factors here, some of which were our local banking laws. And we had a tremendous number of failures, not all of which were really due to fraud. We all know about the real estate boom and then the bust that happened here. And that was the cause of a fair number. But there was a good bit of insider fraud as well. And so our office has really been working with the FBI to aggressively investigate and to prosecute those particularly bank officers who were responsible for those failures. And we're essentially using the banks like their own personal piggy bank, rather than really acting for the benefit of their shareholders.
Well, given the climate that we're in with budget cuts, what are the challenges that you are facing in combating white-collar crime?
You know, it's been a huge challenge for us all across government, not just with the Department of Justice. We have seen our budget slashed, and that has real practical consequences for us in terms of the number of prosecutors that are available to prosecute cases, in terms of the money that we have to be able to conduct the investigations and the investigative agents like FBI and DEA, IRS, and others. To give you some perspective, our district is about the same size as the Southern District of Florida, the Miami district. Actually, we have about 200,000 more residents here than they do in the Southern District of Florida. But yet that district has 2.5 times the number of prosecutors that our district does. And that's because they essentially were staffed up during the days where Miami was really the East Coast hub for drug distribution. Atlanta is now the East Coast hub for the Mexican cartels, not Miami. Miami gets their dope from us now, not the other way around. But yet we're in a different budget scenario now than we were before. And so what that means for our district is that we really have to think hard about using the limited resources that we have to try to have the greatest impact on our district. Much of the criminal enforcement falls to my colleagues on the state side, the local district attorneys. What we try to do is to look at those areas where federal intervention is really needed, whether that's a particular crime problem or a particular individual who may have been in and out of the state system a number of times and has become someone who's really responsible for a lot of violent crime in the district. So we're having to try to be really smart and careful about how we use those limited resources for the citizens of this district.
Sounds like all of government these days.
It is, yes.
Well, identity theft, that has become rampant, it seems. And so are you seeing more of it from your perspective? And if so, how is the Department of Justice tackling this issue?
Yes, I think that identity theft in one form or another has really sort of become the mortgage fraud of this decade now. Mortgage fraud was a huge problem all over the country, and particularly here in Atlanta. And now what we see in identity theft is it really takes so many different forms. It can be the simple thing where somebody steals something out of your mailbox to much more complex schemes where we're talking major hacking. I mean, we've all heard about the hack at Target and Neiman Marcus where,
Yes.
lots of credit card numbers and other personal identifying information was stolen. Lots of tax fraud that's going on now where identities are stolen and then false tax returns are filed to generate a refund in that
Yes.
person's name. That can be a nightmare for them to try to clear up, as well as millions and millions of dollars that are then lost from the Treasury when this happens. So we're not only trying to go after and to aggressively prosecute those cases, but also to try to work on the front end on prevention, as we are in every area now, to try to educate folks on how to be mindful of protecting their personal identifying information, and then to contact law enforcement immediately when they're compromised.
Well, another area that seems to be on the rise is youth violence. Is your office committed to youth violence, and how are you dealing with that?
We are. I mentioned a moment ago about how we have limited resources in our office. But the truth of the matter is, again, no matter how many prosecutors we had in our office, we are not going to jail our way into safer communities. It's really critical that we be working on all three legs of the proverbial stool. There's the enforcement leg, but equally important, there's the crime prevention leg and the prisoner reentry leg. And in our office, we've decided to try to focus our efforts really on youth violence, and specifically looking at some of the areas of our district that are particularly crime-ridden, where it's challenging for kids growing up in that area to make the right choices. And so we've been working hard to try to develop some relationships with systemic programs that we have with different schools and organizations in our district, so that they can get to know some of us in law enforcement and can begin to develop trusting relationships with us, and to be able to have a dialogue with folks with whom they might not otherwise have any contact.
And are you seeing positive effects from the work that you're doing in that area?
It's always hard. Yes, we are certainly in the interaction and the response that we're getting from the kids. Absolutely. It's hard to quantify exactly what does that translate into. From a crime statistic standpoint, I think it would be years down the road before we would necessarily know the answer to that. But we're certainly seeing a huge response from the kids with whom we're interacting. Oftentimes we find that there's a real mistrust of law enforcement, that they have a vision of what we're about based either on what they've seen on TV or maybe what they've heard from others who might not have had such a positive interaction with law enforcement. And so I think they've been sort of surprised when they've gotten to know us, first, that we care about them and we care about trying to help them make better choices that will send their life in one trajectory instead of the other, that can be so devastating for them. And then I think they're kind of surprised when they see we're not really all that different from them. And have really actually been trying to encourage and to interest some of the kids in high school, for example, to maybe consider careers in law enforcement. And by that I mean not just investigating agents, but lawyers and probation officers and parole officers and everybody who's involved in that arm that's really critical for keeping our community safe.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that is happening, and I'm sure you're getting a very positive response from the school systems.
A positive response from the school systems, but what's also been interesting is this is really a new area for our office. We're an office of prosecutors. We are the enforcement arm, and while we've had some involvement in the past in the prevention and reentry efforts, a lot of that from the department has been through grants that go to local organizations or local governments for programs. But I wanted us to be hands-on involved in prevention and reentry. And not only has the response from schools been great, the response from people in my office has been great, from prosecutors, civil lawyers, and staff members who really have found it incredibly rewarding to be involved on the prevention side of trying to prevent a young person from taking the wrong path that not only ruins their life but also impacts the victims of potential future crimes as well. So the people in my office have really gotten a lot out of that positive prevention side as well.
Great. Thank you, U.S. Attorney Yates. We will take a short break, and when we return, we will continue our discussion with U.S. Attorney Sally Yates. You are watching The District. Stay tuned. There's more to come. Welcome back to The District, everyone. I am Joan Garner, your Fulton County Commissioner for District 6. If you just tuned into the show, we are having a discussion with U.S. Attorney Sally Yates about how her office is prosecuting those who violate the law, but also how they are trying to understand the community's needs and leading focused prevention and reentry efforts. The United States Attorney's Office engages in community outreach to establish an ongoing dialogue with the public and to work collaboratively to build safer communities. U.S. Attorney Yates, before the break, you were telling us about youth violence prevention. That leads me to my next question. Mm-hmm. So please tell us about the Department of Justice's program for reintegration. That's big in our communities these days. So more precisely, what is your office doing here in the district to help people who are coming out of prison and trying to reintegrate back into society?
Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it is the third leg of the stool. The Department of Justice recognizes that if we're really serious about building safer communities, we have to be building positive prisoner reentry programs. Right now, if you look at the statistics, over 2/3 of state offenders will reoffend within 3 years from when they come out of prison. It's about 40% of federal prisoners, so we're not doing much better on the federal side. You know, we put people away in prison for good reason. They've committed crimes and there's punishment to be served. But when they come back into society, we can't really expect that anything is going to be different if we haven't, at a minimum, given them the tools to be able to be positive members of society. And that includes both job training, literacy training, and sometimes just basic life skills. It also includes all of us giving people a chance, giving them that second chance after they've paid their debt to society. And we wanted, again, to be hands-on involved in this area as well. And so we have partnered with others in the district here, specifically with the Urban League and with the Morehouse School of Medicine, to develop a prisoner reentry program that we're doing hands-on. The Urban League really has the expertise in this area. So we are working with ex-offenders who are coming out of prison, being able to diagnose what their particular needs are, and then they are having one-on-one counseling in a 12-week program that's called New Beginnings that we were able to do through a small Department of Justice grant. And so far we're seeing really good results with this. One of the primary things we need, though, is to be able to find more jobs. And so we're hosting a summit in the near future for members of the business community to come to our office to learn about some of the challenges for those who are reentering from prison, as well as some of the benefits potentially to their business for giving somebody a second chance and for doing their part in that way to make our community safer.
That's great, and my office is very happy to be a partner in this work with you as well.
And you've been a terrific partner on that. I mean, part of it is building community awareness, and you've been a tremendous leader in that, of the needs that we have. And this is not just, a lot of people like to say, oh, this is just hug-a-thug stuff. You know, I hate that expression, but it's not just hug-a-thug stuff. It's really what makes all of us safer in our community. Because after all, when someone comes out of prison, if they reoffend, they're not only ruining their life and the lives of their families when they then go back to prison, but they're new victims as well. So it's really in all of our interest to be willing to invest in people who are coming out of prison to give them a fighting chance at having a positive impact then in society.
And I think this program is good for educating the public about what the needs are as well. So I'm glad to hear that. So in human trafficking, we hear a lot about that issue, and particularly here in the Atlanta metro area, it's very big. And we have achieved unwanted notoriety, ranking 1 through 5 in this area. How are you combating that?
You know, that's been a real priority for our office for the last several years. Human trafficking, particularly child sex trafficking, is a horrific crime. Everyone certainly would agree with that. And Atlanta has had the dubious distinction of being ranked somewhere in the top 5 to 10. You know, it's hard to know if we are really appreciably worse than other major cities our size, or is it because I think many of us have really made a concerted effort to go out and expose it and to vigorously prosecute it. So it's hard to know if we're really worse than the others, or are we just being more active in this area? And so that's what gains the notoriety. But whether we're number 1 or we're number 10, whatever it is, it's too much. There is no level of acceptable human trafficking. And so this is an area where I'm really proud of how our law enforcement agencies have come together, both FBI and ICE, as well as the local organization, particularly the GBI, have come together and formed a task force with us to really try to proactively combat human trafficking, and particularly child sex trafficking. Both in, you know, it really affects a number of segments of our community. Common victims are runaways. They're girls who are brought here from other countries. They sometimes are, we've even had a group of cases where it was college-age girls and girls who were in college that then were being extorted into this. And so really everybody is at risk in this, and it really takes all of us coming together to be able to combat it.
Well, that sort of leads me to my next question. What can people do to help stem this problem?
Well, part of it is raising awareness. You know, some of the cases that we've been able to prosecute are because a neighbor noticed that something didn't look right about these young women who were being held in homes, who were not coming and going as they pleased, who were always accompanied, who weren't allowed to talk to neighbors. We've done some training at local shopping malls, for example, where the girls are sometimes taken by their pimps there, and he is, and usually the pimp is a he, maybe purchasing items for these girls to be using while they're working for him. But the girls don't have any identification. They don't have money of their own. They're limited by somebody else. Of trying to train some of those in the common shopping areas where they might be able to recognize this. And then also getting the word out in the immigrant community, and particularly the Latino community, where oftentimes I think the girls are afraid to speak out. They may not be here legally and are afraid of what may happen to them. And so part of what we've been trying to do is to get the word out for them to know that they will be protected even if they are undocumented when they're here, when they are a victim or a witness to human trafficking.
Great, thank you. So there appears to be an increase in corruption by public servants. Are you seeing that on the rise in public correction, or has this always been the way that it is?
Well, you know, I've been a prosecutor for more than 20 years. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that, but more than 20 years. And, you know, corruption has been around before I started prosecuting cases and will always be around. It's a serious issue, certainly one that our office takes very seriously, because nothing really strikes at the heart of the public's confidence in their government more than when a corrupt official has betrayed them. So it's serious. I don't know that I would say that it's necessarily gone up from where it used to be. Again, we're aggressively pursuing it, so I think we're exposing it. But I think we all have to keep in mind that, you know, while we're all disappointed and feel betrayed when a public official is involved in corruption, the vast, vast majority of public officials and public employees are honest, hardworking people who are in those jobs for the right reasons. And so we sort of hate to see the entire group be tainted by the acts of a few.
Well, as we wrap up the program, what is the DOJ's new policy on marijuana prosecutions? We're hearing that in the news these days.
Yeah, and there has been a new focus on that, and that's marijuana, even in states that have legalized it, is still illegal federally, but we have a more focused approach on our marijuana prosecutions nationally than we had in the past. In our district, it's not made a tremendous difference here because most of any marijuana enforcement efforts that we do are almost always Mexican cartel related, and that's still a priority for the department. But I think it was our thought that in using our limited federal resources, that marijuana enforcement is generally something that's better left for the state and for them to follow rather than the feds, unless it's one of those cases where we're talking gangs or cartels or where violence and guns are involved.
Great, thank you. So would you please tell our viewing audience, what can Fulton County and its citizens do to become more engaged in helping you in your office?
Well, you know, I go back to that three-legged stool again, and certainly everybody can be involved in some way, and at least two of those legs, prevention and prisoner reentry. You know, there are all sorts of ways to be involved in prevention, whether it's through a community or a church organization or just individually volunteering in areas where we can particularly develop relationships with our youth to try to keep them on the right path. And then on the prisoner reentry side as well, there are lots of organizations that are devoted to that, and I think you would find it very rewarding to be involved in that area as well.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Yates. I appreciate you being on the show today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. When we return, I will share my closing thoughts. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the district. I am Joan Garner, your Fulton County Commissioner for District 6. Today we were joined by U.S. Attorney Sally Yates. U.S. Attorney Yates shared with us information about the programs she has implemented to help reduce today's rising recidivism rate. The United States Attorney's Office, under Sally Yates' leadership, engages in community outreach to establish an ongoing dialogue with the public and to work collaboratively to build safer communities. Statistics show that 60% of former state prisoners and 40% of former federal prisoners return to prison within 3 years. Some major causes of recidivism are lack of employment, homelessness, and physical and mental health issues. The U.S. Attorney's Office is an important part of the process to success for youth and adults who have been sentenced or incarcerated through the judicial process. There are numerous organizations, agencies, and government entities working toward the same goal, but not working together. I believe it is time to bring everyone together to address this issue. Fulton County offers programs and services that address the needs of all its citizens, especially those in need of transitional housing, employment, and mental and physical health care. My District 6 team and I have been connecting people and organizations that are willing to give formerly incarcerated persons a second chance and potentially assist with their successful reentry into society. Teamwork makes the dream work. I want to thank U.S. Attorney Sally Yates for the helpful information she provided us today. And thank you for joining us on The District. That's our show for today. Feel free to contact my District 6 office anytime by calling us at 404-612-8226. You can email us at district6@fultoncountyga.gov, tweet with us at ComJoanGarner, and of course, friend us on Facebook. Until we meet again, I am your District 6 Fulton County Commissioner, Joan Garner. Thanks for watching The District.